When the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom if you follow
Hello?
the drinking
Ring, ring, ring.
Ring, ring, ring. Time to clock in for a new shift.
On the American Girl Talk podcast. We're coming to you not live and on a different day of the week than we originally planned to record this episode because I got Mama Merriment by a cold.
Mama Merriman is crazy.
And I was down for the count with strep throat for the beginning of this week. But we should all take heart in knowing that it was the rare form of strep that is mostly found in barn animals.
I do find heart in that. It means we're so back. Illness is stronger than ever.
It felt like I guess for me, it felt kind of poignant, like an old-time illness decided to take me.
Yeah, you were like, "Oh, okay, cool." I'm like getting in the headspace of our last girl so that I'm ready to pass the torch to our new girl.
To our new girl. And the
Yeah.
fever dreams were right there with me.
This is gonna sound crazy, the best part about being sick, I think. You get to unlock a really whack part of your brain.
I had such a crazy, like, fever dream one of the nights that I was just and I knew it was happening where it
Yeah,
was
and you're
like,
like
this is a fever dream, but
Mm.
let's just ride it out, you know?
but you can't escape it. You're just kinda, like, locked into it, and you're like, "I guess I'm here now."
We can't escape it, but we can escape slavery. And that
And
is what happens in our next girl's book. Guys, we're covering Addy in the worst segue I've ever done.
it's tough, but I was right there with you.
Yeah. So guys, we're on to Addy Walker. Yay! She
Yay.
is a different girl for the so far because it isn't going to be as funny, and we've said that on other episodes. And it's mostly because look at us. It shouldn't be that funny. So we're covering Addy. We read the first book and we're excited to get into it. But before we really get into it, I want to do a little bit of background that I did some research on. And so I did want to say it's kind of fun. We're covering this a day after Juneteenth. So,
Mhm.
which was I believe it's when all of the slave like, I believe it's the day that everyone found out that, like, the Emancipation Proclamation was put into law, if you can, like, fact check that for me real quick.
It is a holiday celebrated on June 19th to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people in the US. The holiday was first celebrated in Texas, where on that date in 1865, in the aftermath of the Civil War, enslaved people were declared free under the terms of the 1862 Emancipation
So it's kind of
Proclamation.
when the news reached everywhere, so where it's appropriate that we're covering Addie starting this week, I think.
I know.
Her doll came out in 1993, and it's a Civil War story, starting in 1864, and it starts on a plantation in North Carolina because Addie is a slave at the beginning of the first book. Her story is written by Connie Porter, who, thank God, is a Black author, which we were
Yes.
worried about a little
We
bit.
were sweating.
Yeah, I was we love Valerie, but this isn't the subject matter for Valerie, you know? And I was reading an article that a journalist interviewed Connie about, and apparently Connie was given a lot of creative freedom about how Addie's story would go, more so than some of the other girls, I think. And she was able to decide kind of what Addie's family structure would look like, how and when she would escape slavery, like throughout the books, and a few other elements where she was just given more freedom. But they made her keep the name Addie Walker. That was the one thing that was a non-negotiable. And it's interesting because in the article I was reading, uh, there was a North Carolina plantation that the author went on a tour of, and she found a, like, record of a slave family, and it was a mother and a daughter, and the mother escaped, and she had to leave her daughter behind, and she got her daughter after the war, but her daughter's name was Aggie Walker.
Hmm.
So a lot of people were saying that there's a lot of research based on that plantation, and it
Sure.
was kind of it's not based on their story, but it's, like, loosely based on, I think.
Influenced by.
Mhm, yeah,
Cool.
so there's something there. She was the first of the dolls to have a new face mold, and she also is the first of the dolls to have textured hair, and I think that's kind of a cool fact, and I think, coming out in 1993, I think that's kind of good of them to pay attention to that stuff and make sure they're doing historically and, like, just, like, genetically accurate looking, racially looking dolls for girls, and apparently, which isn't surprising, her release was a little bit controversial, because a lot of people were wondering, 1, if slavery was an appropriate subject for kids' books, and 2, kind of why the first black doll of the American Girl doll series had to be a slave. Um, and I think that is kind of an interesting point that I kinda just wanna discuss briefly, before we get into the book. Because, like, yeah, slavery in a kid's book, how should it be handled? And, like, slavery as a representation of black people in America, like, how is that handled? And so I was reading a few articles about it. Like, there are interesting think pieces on the internet for anyone who's curious and wants to check them out, people who know way more than me about these subjects. And so I, like, encourage you to, like, read them. I read a few of them, and one thing I think kind of on this issue is that I think to ignore it would be in bad taste, because, like, one of the biggest things we've seen from people disliking Felicity and one of our personal biggest dislikes of the Felicity books, which we otherwise really liked, was kind of the whitewashing and kind of the glossing over of slavery as a concept in early America. And I think to kind of ignore it is to ignore a huge part of American history.
Mhm.
It was Slavery was only abolished in 1865 in the US, which is 160 years ago, like this year, basically.
Not that long.
And not that long ago, the country is only 249 years old. So that means that slavery has been a part of this country for roughly 40% of the time this country has been a country. And so to ignore it or to pretend that it's not something that we need to talk about and we need to teach kids about, I think is kind of doing a disservice to people who suffered under it. And I think that, putting names and faces to historic situations is important to kind of give empathy and teach kids to put themselves in situations that they're not in and kind of teach them how other people have struggled. And one of the authors, and I'll put a show note in at the end of this, but one of the authors said, in the articles that I read, that Addy humanizes slavery for children, which is crucial since slavery, by definition, strips humanity away. And I think that's a really important thing to note. And I personally think, like, it's a tough subject and it's hard to handle. And I think you do have to be very careful with how you speak about these things and how you approach these things. But just because something is difficult and uncomfortable and makes us look bad, it happened. And
Yeah.
we can't pretend that it didn't happen, or we can't pretend that it happened, but it wasn't so bad. Like, it's kind of like acknowledge your mistakes. I think acknowledging your mistakes and acknowledging bad things in the past is the only way that you can actually get better from them.
Yeah, well, and I think for me, and this is part of my end notes, but I this is another doll I'm going into. I don't know anything about her other than I know that she was a slave. But I think the most interesting thing so far is that she doesn't stay a slave. I think the conversation for me would maybe hit differently if we were going into this knowing we're about to read 6 books where, a girl that's meant to inspire bravery and courage spends 6 books enslaved the entire time. I am excited to see where her story goes, but I like that it starts from the harsh reality into she will be a free girl in the next 5 books. I think it would have been a worse place to start not based in slavery if we were going to be in this time period, because I think it would have been easier for them to step kind of around it, a la Felicity's books, and be like, "Well, in the past, and there's some other people who are enslaved, but Addie's free." So I
Well,
think
even if they
it's
had yeah, sorry, but even if they had started
yeah.
with Addie being, like, recently freed, or, like, if the
Yes.
book had
It
started,
would've
like
it would've been an easier out, and so
mhm.
I think if we're going to set her in this time period, I like that we start it like is a bad word for it, but I appreciate, I think is a better word, that you start from a place, yeah, that humanizes an unfortunate reality of our country, but looking away doesn't do anybody any good, like you said.
Yeah. So just wanted to say that before, and, like, anyways, like, off my soapbox, I'm, like, into the book. So we'll start with chapter 1, Whispers of Freedom. So we start with Addie lying in her family's cabin, and it's really hot. Her baby sister is breathing down her neck, which, as we can all relate, is a very sticky feeling. And she's kind of overhearing her parents talk about something, and it seems pretty interesting. So she's pretending to sleep. Her dad kind of cues in that she might be or her mom kind of cues in that she's awake. So her dad goes to check, and she kind of does the most unconvincing child pretending to be asleep thing of just like shutting your eyes tighter.
Yeah, the art's really good. It doesn't describe her necessarily this way, but the art is her, like, flopped over with, like, her arm kinda, like,
Covering
dramatically
her eyes.
posed over her, and I did think, yeah, I said it I did think it was a little funny,
It's very like
'cause
sleeping in your car, you know?
it's very, like, maybe my friends won't catch that I'm, like, eavesdropping on them
At the
pose.
sleepover.
Yeah, at the sleepover, and it's a little girl in her purse.
She's listening to them talk, they go back deciding that she's asleep, and they're debating whether to escape the South slavery now that the South is losing the war because it's 1864, things are turning for the worse for the South. So, Mama and Papa are kinda going back and forth, Uh, I think Papa wants to leave now, and Mama says that they should stay because she believes that since she's the seamstress and Papa's the woodworker, they're too valuable to be separated. And they should just wait it out because they're pretty sure that the union's going to win, and then the slaves will be emancipated. But Papa's mostly worried about Addie's brother Sam, who has already tried to escape once and was caught by slave catchers and brought back to the plantation and punished. And they kind of do a little kind of flashback of Sam being punished, where he was whipped in front of everyone. And Addie remembers being very upset about it and crying and watching her parents stand there without crying. And she kind of says, she remembers going back to the cabin that night and screaming at her parents that they didn't care about Sam because they weren't crying and they weren't upset. And her dad tells her that like they aren't free to show their emotions like that, so that she can't always be showing her emotions about how she feels about things so like freely basically. Um and that she has to learn how to kind of keep it in more. It's kind of, I mean, it's like basically code switching kind of, you know.
Yeah. Well, I put down a quote where he says, "There's always freedom in your head, Addie," because I
Mhm.
like that. I guess I appreciated, and it's a kind of a theme throughout the book that she sort of learns, but I like that she's always sort of taught, though, that, like, she's allowed to be whoever inside, like
Mhm.
like, she can feel those big feelings, but, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you have to learn when is the time to show them and when not, too.
It's
But
very,
I like that her
conceal, don't feel from Elsa, right?
yeah, very Frozen coded. But I like that even though she's being sort of taught, an unfortunate truth about their current reality, I like that her father still kind of instills in her that, like,
To
there
keep
is
keep spirit like, keep your
that
feelings.
you're allowed to keep your heart and your true truth, like, for yourself. You don't have to give it away just because you can't necessarily, like, show how you feel in the moment.
Mhm. So she continues to listen, and they're kind of going back and forth, and Mama still thinks they should wait, and Papa's really trying to convince her that now's time to go. He's worked on a plan with Uncle Solomon, who's an older kind of grandpa figure to Addie on the plantation, of like, we have to go down. Basically, he knows a route, and he's like, I have the route, I have the plan. We should just go as soon as possible. And again, Mama's wishy-washy about it. And then Papa kinda says the main reason he wants to leave is because he sees Addie, who's always so bright-eyed, like, happy in the mornings, like, coming back from work every day, like, looking like an old woman, basically. And he's like, his heart's being broken by watching Addie's spirit break and watching his, like, little daughter be so tired. The chapter kind of ends with Mama not responding to Papa saying that, and Addie just kind of lingering on that conversation. So that's chapter 1.
I will say she also has a little doll like all of our other
Yeah.
girls, but like a proto doll. This is why I said I make a lot of you did it too, but there's a lot of interesting parallels to Kirsten, but obviously, like, Kirsten's story is that she's an
Mhm.
immigrant coming here, but I think even like that the doll is, like, made of, like, straw and kind of
Like the
like
milkweed doll.
scrap,
Yeah.
yeah, so like scrap fabric that they have Janie. But I did think it was cute that she has a doll here
Yeah,
as well.
there are a few more like Kirsten parallels, I think, than it's a more Kirsten coded book than Molly, Samantha, or Felicity was, you know?
Yeah, I think right now it was just interesting to see, like, because I was curious how similar or how different she would feel from the other girls we've read so far, and I was surprised at how much she was similar to the girl. I would argue we were kinda like, "What do we do with her?" at times.
The whitest girl, potentially,
The
too.
whitest girl, mayhaps.
So we
Anyway.
get to chapter 2, and similar titles, but this one's less fun. Chapter 2, "Sold!" Exclamation point.
Yeah, we are back to the naming conventions of
That we've been
Kirsten,
begging for, but
but
be
these ones are,
careful.
these ones aren't so fun.
Be careful what you wish for, guys.
Yeah.
So Addy this chapter starts with Addy doing her daily I don't wanna say chores, like, her daily work, you know? So Addy's out working in the field with the other kids on the plantation, and they're deworming the plants, and she's kinda got freedom on the mind, so she's like, "When I'm free, I can learn to read and write. I could wear fancy dresses. I can do all this," and she's kind of excited by this idea that they might be going to freedom. One thing I did wanna ask you about your opinion on is, so they mentioned that she's out in the field with a bunch of other enslaved children. I thought it was interesting that she didn't have, like that they didn't have a kind of friend for her, you know? Like,
So I don't know, but I think from the research we've done, Addie doesn't have a companion doll ever, right?
she does not have a companion doll, but she does have a friend. I think her name is Sarah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I was interested in that. I did wonder if it was to kind of there's obviously a tragic separation in this chapter of her family, and then later with her. Well, I don't wanna spoil. We won't well, I won't spoil anything yet, but there's a couple's different fracturing of her family, so I wondered if there wasn't a friend here because if you didn't want, like, a Marta on top of it almost of, like, if you take away her family from her, her literal, like, blood family, and then you're also like, "Also, her, like, 3 friends, uh,
Had to
don't
stay
get to
behind.
escape with her." I wondered if maybe that was too much reality for the
Yeah.
already pretty reality heavy, but it is interesting she doesn't really have that. But also a lot of things happen in the book, so
It might just be
I
too much
waffled.
time. Yeah. I just
Right?
thought it might be interesting to show the dynamic of just kind of, like, what that would have been like, I guess, for a kid. Because if you think
Yeah.
about it, like, there were slave children who escaped slavery with their parents, and they talk a lot about the family structure on plantations and how you, like, basically made family with the other enslaved people on the plantation. And so I just thought it might be interesting to show that, like, especially going forward when her family's trying to unite, like, what would that mean for kind of what she thinks about, like, her friend who's stuck back in that situation, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I don't need it. I didn't need it, but I was just kind of like, it
No.
was curious to kind of mention that she's with a bunch of other children and then not kind of even have, like, someone talk to her, you know?
Yeah, I also wondered too, I think we kind of understand how harsh, of a level of slave owner on the plantation that they're on and, like, the
Mhm.
overseers in the next couple chapters too, but I also wonder I know from, like, my educate like, our education well, we grew up in different states, but I imagine it was somewhat similar. Well, we did a lot of the, like, first person account and then, like, third person account like,
Mhm.
readings, particularly about slavery, um, and, I feel like a lot of the time, like, discussion when you were working was very like, a very punishable offense, like,
Yes.
even when
Yeah,
she
I
brings,
don't
like,
think
the
you're
water
yapping.
out even, like, when she brings the water out later, I kind of wondered if also, like I mean, they were children, but they were treated kind of all like adults,
Yeah.
essentially. Like, they
No, they're tree adults with, like,
you didn't
tinier hands.
you weren't a kid. You were a property, which is horrific.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean, you
anyway.
see it because, like, right after that, after she finishes her worming, it's time to go bring the water pail to the field hands who are picking, I assume, the cotton, and she goes to her brother and he has a riddle for her. And she stops for like a second too long, and I think the overseer like does be like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And he's like, "I'm just
Uh-huh.
drinking." And he looks at them for a minute, and then he turns around, and her brother says he has a riddle to tell Addy. My only nitpick in this book will be this is not a riddle.
Yeah.
He tells her what's smaller than a dog but can put a bear on the run, and the answer is a skunk. That's just not a riddle.
I was like, yeah, because I feel like when I think of a riddle, it's like that one about like what walks on four legs in the morning, two in the day, and three by night.
I think by nature, a riddle has to have like the answer somewhere in the question.
Or like what's black and white and red all over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't
like
know. I'm not a riddle master. The one thing I did think about after I wrote my nitpick was like Sam might be overhearing like some of the overseers telling riddles and be like, "Oh, that's fun," and he might be coming up with his own, and like
so he's
not.
like, I've come up with something clever.
Well, yeah. So just like he's like, I know the structure is a question than an answer. So that's something I thought, but that was just my one where I read it. I was like, that's not really
Also, she got it right, so I'm kind of dying to know.
if it's a
Hang on,
riddle.
I'm gonna look this up.
Or it could be like a snake too, is the thing. Like, there's nothing that like makes it have to be a skunk. That's the thing with the riddle. I think it has to be that answer.
So, fun fact, if you look this up, it it's only on answers.com, and it's
Hmm.
because somebody wrote a skunk and then a little tongue out emoji and wrote, I know it from Meet Addy.
So
This is on
inconclusive.
answers.com. So it appears that this is not yes, it might just be child fun making.
Yeah, and that's just like, look, we want to make this
Fair
fun
enough.
for you guys.
Yeah.
That was the one fun thing I could pull out.
Sorry I have to find the little truly the little things in this
Just
one.
gotta like
For
needle it.
now. I think perhaps there will be some more lighthearted fun
I think the
be
other books
had.
will be a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun, some of them. And so while she's like talking to Sam, she kind of wonders if she should tell Sam about the conversation her parents had last night. She kind of wants he's her big brother. He's 14. She wants his opinion on it. But she kind of decides like, better not. Like I'll deal with this later.
Yeah.
This is a tomorrow problem. So then she goes to her next work of the day, which is catering the meal and like being the house servant for the master's like lunch or dinner. And she goes to Aunt Lula, who's in the kitchen. And one thing I thought was very interesting about this is Aunt Lula is clearly half white from the description.
It was interesting.
Or
Yes.
like I won't say clearly, but she is. They say she
No,
has very light skin.
the
She has green
it
eyes
does
and she
appear
has
that
red
she's
hair.
mixed. Yeah.
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 So I thought that, and but they don't say anything about it though, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I wonder if she'll come how many of these characters will come back into play in the later books.
I think Aunt Lula does because she has
Come
the
back.
baby by the end, but
Right.
so she has to do something. But I thought it was an interesting detail that I remember. I don't think I read all the Addie books, but I do remember reading Meet Addie, and I don't remember clocking that at all. Like that
I feel
was.
like again, I know we're reading these as adults, but that is been the interesting thing when there are more subtle hints for a reader. Like if you're a parent, and I know some of our
Mhm,
audience has said that they are like moms who
mhm,
like enjoyed the books when they were younger. Now they have like a daughter or a kid that they're like, "Oh, I want to collect the books for like my kid," or I'm like rereading them with my daughter, and then this is kind of
mhm.
like my mom like
Don't
fun
don't do this.
fun fun interpretation. No, right, but like a kinda like, "Oh, I get to listen to this because I'm just reading it to my kid who doesn't need to listen to 2 a 20, 30 something year old women, swear and hack their way through these books." But, it is interesting because that too, like, I don't know, there's so many different things that play into, racial dynamics, especially um, in slavery and like which people would get to work like in the house versus who got to work in the fields.
a lot of the and people are free to correct us because we're speaking as we learn these things too, but a lot of times I do believe lighter-skinned slaves were more often likely to be house slaves. Um, and so it doesn't necessarily seem surprising that Auntie Lula might be the, cook of the house, you know?
Yes, I think and I'll do more research for this for the future books, but I do believe there was a lot of colorism even then that was happening. So it is interesting to clock that she was likely mixed and that, like, the master kind of notes that, like, he is being very particular about who he's keeping and why, because he's having
Mhm.
to sell his slaves, which we learn.
Yeah, so Addie grabs the trays and the food from Auntie Lula, and she goes in the dining room where Master Stevens is eating with a mystery man, and they are discussing kind of the war and how it's getting very costly. And Master Stevens says he's going to have to sell a few of his slaves, and Addie realizes they're discussing Sam and her dad, and so she's kind of like shit, obviously. Um, and she's kind of trying to keep her cool, but obviously this is something that you would immediately wanna run outside and tell everyone, but so she's doing her duty, and she goes to pour the guy who's buying the slaves water, and he, like, is like, "This little one is pretty cool, like, she seems good," and he, like, pats Addie on the head, and the picture of Addie is a little bit funny, where she's
It's
like,
so
it's like a fuck no face. Like
well, and it's a little funny here because she does basically be like, "Oh, this is what my dad was teaching me about. This is a moment where I have
I gotta
to,
keep it in,
I
yeah.
gotta keep it in." It is the art is so first of all, it does look like she's looking directly at you, the reader,
Yeah,
so
she's
you're
breaking the
kind
fourth wall in the photo, which is new.
it's new, but it is very, like there are lots of I'm gonna use the word visceral a lot this episode, so
Mhm.
everybody drinking game, start taking shots when I say that word. This is the first, like, moment in the book that made me, like, physically, like, recoil, other than the description of the whipping of Sam earlier in the
Mhm.
book, which is also pretty graphic for a kid's book. I don't
Yeah.
think unfairly so, but it's pretty visceral. And then this
Mhm.
one too, the especially since, so many, like, Black women talk about, like, "Don't disrespect my hair, like, don't feel like you can just touch
Touch
my
my
hair,"
hair. Yeah.
and it's he's treating her very in that, like, very, like, animalistic way, which is so
Like a
horrific,
curiosity,
and
like, "Oh, look."
it's, like, dehumanizing, right? It is
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this one," but he's not seeing her as, like, a person, he's like, "Whoa, what can I buy anybody? Is anybody fair game?" It's
Well, it's
just
just even,
so
like, touching someone, like, without permission, like
permission.
and, like, this is such a bad analogy, but I'm just gonna say it for a minute, like, I used to waitress. If someone had, like, touched me, like, without my permission when I was, like, handing them food and, like, put their hand on me in any way, I would have, like, freaked out, like and it's, like, because I have, obviously, the luxury to freak out about it, but it's, like, I
Right,
can't imagine, like, pretending that I like, not pretending that that would bother me, you know?
right, being like, "Oh, this is okay," even though it's not, and you
Yeah.
feel awful about it.
Well, yeah, and so Addie, because of this gross weird man, she accidentally spills the water, and he's like, "Oh, don't want that one anymore, like, too sloppy." And so then Master yells at Addie to, like, go clean it up, so she runs out to Auntie Lula and tells her what she heard, and Auntie Lula says, like, "Well, fuck the water, like, go and try and tell them." So this whole part is, like, kind of hectic because Addie's running around like a chicken with her head cut off, basically, trying to figure out because, like, again, she's in a situation where she can't just run through the plantation because
Right.
someone's gonna stop her. Like, she has to kind of figure out how to find an excuse to go find Sam and Dad, and so I think Auntie Lula suggests she goes to, pretend to bring them water. So she tries to go bring
Mhm.
them water again, but the overseer sees her and it says he's like, "It's not time for water," which again is just a little thing of give people water,
Right.
like, what do you mean it's not time for water? Like, anyway. And so then she runs back and she finds Mama and Mama's with, I think Mama is with Auntie Lula now. And they're like, well, we have to go find them. Like, we just got to go back out. And they go back out and they see, Sam is tied up in a wagon and Papa is tied up lying on the ground. And so like it's too late basically. So
Yeah.
and Addy starts to get very upset and she's like begging that they keep her dad and her brother there and they're obviously not listening to her and so she throws herself on her dad and she's crying and he's telling her to let go and the Master Stevens is telling Addy to let go and she's not and so then Master Stevens whips Addy and then finally he says like if you don't get off I'll whip you again and he rips Addy off her dad and her brother are taken away and she and her mom are on the ground crying and she says that even mama couldn't keep her feelings inside. So her brother and her dad, but what they feared would happen happened. So her brother and her dad are taken away. And I think that's such a hot take. I think that's such a terrible aspect of slavery was the splitting up of families. Like it's just like kind of mind-boggling to me that people would do that in any way because like in the sickest way, like that's not gonna make the people that you keep productive workers. Like, I hate to say it like that, but, like, that's mentally like, you really have to see people as, like, not human to not understand, like, well, I would feel so miserable if I was taken from my family that I wouldn't be able to do anything. Like, that's kinda what I mean by that awful statement is, like, it's such a weird idea that they didn't even see these people as human enough to, like,
Well,
have
I
such
think
visceral grief over being ripped apart from your family in, like, 20 minbecause
well,
like, they
yeah,
didn't,
I
like
mean,
they weren't gonna, like, tell you, like, "Hey, John, like, just so you know, we're gonna put you up for auction next week," because 'Cause you're, like, property, and it's just such kind of a mind-boggling thing, and something that must have just really been, like, can you imagine living with, like, that constant fear that, like, tomorrow, you're gonna come home and you're like, "Where's dad?" And it's like, "Got sold. He's in Alabama now." Like
well, I think to some level too, the fear from the, uh, oppressor's side, right, is that if you do keep a family together, you strengthen a bond, and if you let people build connections and
Yeah.
relationships, if you let them be people and be human, then you risk losing them because they'll like, I mean, her whole family was thinking about it, right? And
Mhm.
so far it's just been Sam, but if the 4 of them run away, that's 4 people that you don't have, but if you break them off and you sell them away and you split them up, it is like that horrific thing, right? Which is like you could weigh the pro and con if you're an evil, awful person, right? Of if I keep a family together, I run the risk of if they do leave, then I lose all of them. But if I need money and I have people who are able bodied and I can get rid of them, it is like there's so many layers to the horror because you think you've uncovered them all and you dig deeper and you're like, and this, and this, and this. And I
Yeah.
mean, I know we've talked about it before, and I think the book says it at the end too, but the whole other part too is like of emancipation in the end, it wasn't necessarily out of a generosity of heart on the behalf of the US government so much as it was a we fucking hate the South and anything that will weaken them will strengthen us.
Well, yeah, it was kind of
Uh,
more of a I mean, like, I'm glad it happened, but it was kind of like, let's, like, really just fuck things up over it. Let's, like, rustle the, like, foundation a little bit more,
oh
Like,
yeah.
let's get
Well,
things rumbling so that that more people are leaving and, like, we're causing, like, internal revolts, so
yeah, well, later on, I'll get on my, soapbox about being a Jayhawk and what that means in terms of, like, slave versus free states, but it doesn't really fit in the narrative of this book. But,
no.
my college's mascot is named after, like, a very cool part of US history on the Kansas side, that
Mm.
was about, like, fighting that Missouri was basically like, "You need to be a slave state, Kansas, and we're gonna freak out and burn all your shit down." And Kansas was like, "No." But anyway, I'll do a whole spiel about it later.
That's the opposite of my state's history, which was
You're like, yeah, a
where it was
colorful
like
history."
where it's like, "Hey, you're" like, Lincoln saw Maryland and was like, you're coming with me, whether you like it or not.
You're gonna need to come over here."
You're gonna need to be, not a slave state anymore." And they're like, "Oh, Maryland was put under, like, martial law during"
You're like, "Huh, funny how that works."
I'm like, "But you know what? I still like to say that we were in the Union." on a
union by
severe
union by
technicality.
force. Yeah.
So we're into chapter 3, new plan, a new plan. So unsurprisingly, everyone is heartbroken, and Addie is basically just going through the motions of work the next day, through the deworming of the plants, and she's been crying so much, and she's so distracted by just like losing her dad and her brother and at a complete loss that she's missing a bunch of the worms. And so the overseer goes to inspect her plants and sees that she's missing them, and so he grabs all the worms that she has missed, and he goes up to her and he forces her mouth open and shoves the worms inside her mouth and forces her to chew them, and tells her to not miss any more worms. And this is just I think this is actually a very interesting thing that Connie chose to do, because I think it is, like I said, remember kids, cruelty can be creative. And I think more than anything for kids reading this book, this is probably something that they can picture and
Oh,
be
yeah.
like, "No, that's bad." Like, 'cause, like, I mean, I can't picture being whipped, you know? Like,
Sure.
I can't picture, like, a bunch of atrocities that happen. Like, I can understand that they're terrible, but I don't know what that feels like. It's almost like, I guess this is kinda gross, but, like, in, Game of Thrones when Theon is being tortured?
Mhm.
The worst part of that scene for me is when they're pulling his nails.
Mm.
They're, like,
Yeah.
putting tiny, like, knives under his nails, and that's the worst. I can't That's the one part of that whole torture sequence I can't watch because I can almost imagine what that feels like, you know? Because it's such a
Yeah.
smaller pain as opposed to
Well,
something like your arm being chopped off.
yeah.
And so
I
I
think
think
that
the worms is,
there's
like, an interesting choice because it is just, like, a small thing that you don't need to do, that's nasty and has no point and doesn't help any situation and it's just done out of pure cruelty. But, like, I think a kid could be like, "Worms," you know?
Oh, I think you're really onto something. To me, that I think it's interesting that she included this because I think it's just the kind of cruelty that even kids do to each other. Like, I
Mhm.
think, like, mean kids, like, I was chased around by kids I was friends with in the neighborhood with, like, bugs out of, like, a
Mhm.
mean-spirited interest in, like, torturing me in, like, a kid way, right?
Mhm.
So I think you as a kid can be like, "I'm scared of bugs." You know what, like, creepy crawlies look like. I went on a walk today and saw a lizard eating a huge ass scary looking worm. Um, that's exactly what I was picturing when we sat down to record. Like, I was like, "I didn't even know bugs that size lived in this room." So I think you're completely right. I think if you're a little kid and you, like, go out and play with kids in your neighborhood and you're reading these books and you're like, "Oh, yeah, like, a mean boy at school chased me with a creepy crawly the other day," and then you're
Mhm.
reading Addie's book. It's also this is let me think about how to phrase this. I think this is another interesting part about Addie's book and how truly in the action because I think we've talked about how some of the other girls are adjacent to a major thing happening in
Yeah.
history,
Mhm.
especially Molly. Like, her dad is away, and there are people who lose, like, family members or loved ones, and they die in tangentially, and, like, Felicity loses her grandfather, and, like, revolution is coming, but none of them are so actively in it. So
Mhm.
Addie right now is, like, very different, which we knew was coming. And so I think, you know, not only is she whipped, which is horrific, but then you also yeah, like you said, you get to see a different level of cruelty that I think kids will
Mhm.
I feel like if you're a kid reading this, you're gonna remember the bug eating scene.
Oh, I did. Like, ugh, and the
Yeah.
description of it, like, squishing in her mouth was just like
Yeah. Oh, yeah, visceral is
yeah,
my
it
word of
was
this episode.
and it's just I hate it. And so Addie goes back to her cabin that night, and mom's like, "So how was your day?" And Addie's like, "I hate it here. I hate white people." And I'm reading it, and I'm thinking like, "Girl, same." me too at this point. And mom is like more level headed and says, no, you don't, or you shouldn't. Like, she's like, you know, bad white people. Like, you don't know all white people. You can't start generalizing and you can't start filling your heart with hate. You have to like lead with love, basically. She goes, you want, like, if you want to lead with hate, then you'll end up like people like Master Stevens and the overseer who've been hating so long they like don't know how to love. And so
Mm-hmm.
mom has a good lesson for her kind of just like I think basically the idea which goes both ways is like judge individuals, not groups, you know? Like
Yeah.
you can see a bunch of bad people who fit a profile, but that doesn't mean that all those people are bad. And so I thought that was like, and I also think honestly very big of mama at this point after her husband has been taken away and her son has been taken away to and watching her daughter go through all this terrible torture basically to be able to say that, you know. So it's just like some people just have very strong convictions and
Well, I also
it's
think
just
she's a mother figure, right, to, well, Addie's probably 9, like all our other
mhm,
girls right now. I think there is something I think on the American Girl page for her, it says that Addie shows great courage and a love of learning,
mhm.
which is funny and very, a very succinct sentence about everything I suspect we're gonna learn about her. I like that she's instilling in her daughter that love should be the bigger thing in her because she is so young and impressionable.
Mhm.
And if you only have people saying nasty things to you, you do become hateful. And if you only lead from a perspective of hating and cruelty, then you become hateful and cruel. And how very apt for perhaps once again the environment we find ourselves in these days.
Oh, you don't say. You don't
Hmm.
say that once again American Girl Talk teaches us that history rhymes.
History is a circle in some regard.
Yeah. So so mama tells her, let's not fret about these particular white people because we are getting the fuck out of Dodge tonight. Surprise, bitch. We're
Oh,
escaping.
see ya. Get ready.
So mama like reveals she has boy clothes for them to hide in. She knows the plan that Papa had, and they are leaving tonight and they are going to escape. And Addy is like, yeah, I know. I heard you guys talking about the other night. And Mama's like, well, you don't know this. Esther, your baby sister, is not coming with us. And that is another tough sell. But I'm assuming Mama didn't want a mash situation with Esther on the road to freedom because Esther's a little baby. So Esther's going to cry and they just can't risk like having Esther be fussy and loud while they're potentially hiding from people. So
Mhm.
Addie finds out that they're gonna have to leave her baby sister behind, and it's a little sad. Well, it's very sad, but it's a little sad because she's like, I can't believe I was mad about Esther breathing on me. You know, like I don't like, and so she feels sad. And she asks Mama if they can all sleep on the same pallet tonight, so they can all cuddle. And Mama thinks that's a good idea, and so they all cuddle up for one last night together. We get to chapter 4, Into the Night. So they wake up in like the dead of night, and Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon meet Addie and Mama outside, and Solomon gives them a little straw hat and a little felt hat to wear. And Addie's in a very glum mood, so he does a little coin trick for her, and he pulls a coin out from behind her ear and is like, "Cheer up!" Like, and she's wowed by it. And he said, "I want you to keep this coin because freedom has a price." And he tells them a bit of advice for the road where he says, travel by night, follow the railroad tracks, wade through streams to throw off your scent, and avoid Confederate soldiers. So they give Esther to Auntie Lula, and Addie leaves. Is it Janine or Jamie?
I think it's Janie. Also, did you know that her doll comes with that coin that her uncle gives her?
Really?
Yeah, she comes with the half dime and the necklace her mom gives her later in
Aw.
this. Yeah,
I was wondering about the dime. I knew about the necklace, but I was wondering about the dime.
it was, something I had filed away to see if it was brought up in the book because I figure, you're not giving dolls
Mhm.
frivolous.
Yeah.
items in their meat outfit. But yes, her meat doll comes with the half dime reproduction, which I thought
Oh,
was
that's
cute
cute.
as like a little
So
lucky
you don't try
charm.
and spend it, reproduction?
Yeah, exactly. Also, I do think it's cute that he like is like that it's a magic. Like, ooh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I know.
A
It was
little
a
good
nice
luck
moment
charm.
of levity before once again she's in some level of peril.
But so she leaves, Janie with Esther, which is, like we said, kind of another Kirsten parallel where she has to leave something behind for her journey, but she wants to keep something of hers with her baby sister. So they give everyone a hug and they head out, and Addie keeps looking back to see Esther, but she's crying too much and she can't see.
Yeah.
It's a tough book.
It is it's I think it does a really good job though of making you care like a lot
Yep.
immediately about her. Like
Mhm.
maybe this is harsh, but I know we make a lot of jokes about Marta dying, and she dies a pretty terrible, tragic, sad way, and Kirsten's pretty devastated about it. But uh no offense Kirsten doesn't really carry it with her, the weight of it, in the
Yeah.
same way that like obviously there none of her family has died yet,
Yet.
but and hopefully doesn't, but who's to say? um I don't know actually, so please don't say if you know. Commenters, but I think as much as we made the note earlier at the start of the episode, and it is still my note at the end, which is that we don't know Addy that well yet. I like that you understand the weight emotionally of everything that's happening without it just being like, well, yeah, obviously, like terrible things happen. And I think it's sets up a good base for you to care about the future of everything. Like, that she loves the doll. She loves the doll with her little sister. She
Mhm.
feels emotional about her leaving her little sister. She feels emotional about losing her father and her brother. And now, like, how do you shoulder all of that? And you're also a little girl who's about to go run through the woods disguised as a boy with your
In
mom
a scary situation.
in a scary situation, honestly, on a path that like you've just been told like orally multiple
Yeah.
times. You are just this sounds so
There's not even a map
goofy.
there's not even a map as bad as Ben's to lead you there, you
Oh,
know?
right. Well, and I was gonna say, when I was younger, and, I think you made a note of this in the peek in the past, we can talk about it more later. Did you ever listen to when you learned about, like, slavery, were you ever taught the song "Follow the Drinking Gourd"?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I just think about that song a lot when
I think that if
I
I
was
can
reading
find it,
this
I think
part.
that might be the, like, intro song for this one.
It's, like, burned in my memory,
Yeah.
from all this.
With
But
that and
this
Wade in
is,
the
like
Water.
yes.
Yeah.
I think is like something that's so fascinating about all of this is that like there's so much folklore around the Underground Railroad and the different paths to freedom that
Mhm.
slaves who were escaping slavery took, that I find like it is deeply fascinating me. This sounds very stupid in comparison, but I love ghost stories. You're also a ghost enjoyer, and ghosts are like a version of like oral history, but like it's a very like small part of like the bigger thing. And so like something like this where it's just somebody told somebody this is how I got out, and then it passes like from person to person. It's just an incredible piece of history to me. I think this part is my favorite part of the
Well,
book.
there's just so much interesting, I think, with kind of especially the Underground Railroad and helping slaves escape to freedom of just, like, for lack of a better word, like, lore that you had to just,
Yes,
like,
but
trust,
it
and even
is.
yeah, even things like, alright, so you have to follow these railroad tracks to the bend in the way, and then the red shuttered house, like, has a woman in it who will help you. And even the things, like, I remember I'm sure everyone learned about, but like I said, I'm from Maryland. We were a passage state on the Underground Railroad. A lot of like 40 minutes from my house are like a bunch of places that were like safe houses on the Underground Railroad. There's like trails you can follow.
Mhm.
Um, like the Harriet Tubman Museum is like an hour from my house. And there's, like, things even with, like, the quilts where they'd put certain quilts out when it was, like, safe to
Yes.
come in and safe
Yes,
not to. So, like, if
signals.
there was, like, a red quilt, then, like, Confederate soldiers were nearby or inside. If it's a blue quilt, then you can come inside and, like, the person will help you. And, like, just I think that's just, like, kind of so interesting, all that happened by, like, word of mouth, basically, and,
Yeah.
like, like, getting passed around from different areas of the South and different plantations and different families and different people. Like, I think it's just a very, like, fascinating, aspect of American history that just kind of, like, this whole movement to, like, help people escape slavery, and just especially knowing growing up in these areas, which I'll get to right now, they kind of scamper off into the woods, and it's scary and dark, and, Addie hears a big noise, and she screams, and it just turns out to be, like, an opossum or something. And then she gets upset and she apologizes to mama because she says, like, "We left Esther behind because we were worried she'd scream, and, like, here I go, like, screaming." And then mama kind of is like, "Hey, like, it's okay," but they're like, "Remember, like, keep your feelings inside, like, you can't always just, like, react to things, like, you have to, like, take a step back." And so they find a cave and they seek refuge in it for the night and they nap a bit, so they could once the sun starts to rise. But they only nap like half the day because it gets so muggy and buggy because 'cause they're in North Carolina in the summer and, ugh, like, ugh, the mosquitoes. And so they wake up
Oh,
because 'cause they're being, like,
yeah.
bitten, and I hate
There's a whole other
humidity.
level of body horror happening in this
I
part.
know. This part I also felt viscerally, just, like, the humidity of, like, running through the woods at night and being sweaty and then waking up in, like, a buggy cave with, like, mosquitoes, like,
Oh, yeah, and all you have is literally, like, the ill-fitting disguise clothing that you
it's
have
probably
to, like,
wool
escape
too.
in. It's 100% wool and, like, probably worn and so maybe that's
Scratchy.
yeah, yeah, scratchy just over time.
Ugh,
Ugh.
so they can't sleep, so they decide to eat. So they're eating the food, and mama tells her, that she has a gift for her, and mama gives Addie a cowrie shell necklace, which is a shell from Western Africa, and apparently it is her father's grandmother's necklace that she wore or that she brought with her when she was taken from Africa and sold into slavery in the US. She says that her great grandmother's name was Aduke, and that's what Addie's name is. And so she's kind of Addie's namesake. And so Mama wants Addie to have a piece of her. And she says to Addie, which I think is nice, that her story ends with slavery and yours will end with freedom.
Also, that the string is, her brother's
Oh,
shoelace
yeah, I've read about that.
on the
Yeah, the string is
necklace,
her brother's shoelace, which is nice.
so she gets a little bit of
Um,
her family with her.
I like the thing that you wrote. So if you want to, like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So in the scene, she gives her the necklace, and I am a very emotional person who puts a lot of value into material objects as like a vehicle for like love, like jewelry specifically. Like when I've had family members like die or think about like, I promise this is a roundabout way to get to the thought I
Mhm.
had. Listeners, but nobody's ever called me brief. Um, and that's okay. That's why we have a podcast. Um, but I always tell, like, family members, like, to me, the things I want to be left are, like, I just want, like, one object. I like to have an object to, like, remember and think of as, like, a physical thing, and Addie's mom basically is like, "You know how I told you that, like, the love you feel, like, that I want you to focus on instead of the hate, is it's never gonna be a physical thing you can, like, hold or touch, but
Mhm.
this necklace you can always wear and basically use it as, like, a conduit to help, like, find and ground yourself in, like, goodness or in love or in your love for your family or your life or whatever, when you're scared, etcetera, like, you can always, like it is a physical thing, you can touch it, and it can be, like, a real connection, like, to your past and to your future, and I just really liked it. I thought it was special, and I think, like, not that our other girls don't have, like but it's, like, it has the same sort of value as, like, uh Samantha's locket with her parents in it, right? She's never going to get to have her parents again, and they're dead. She won't have it, but she can always carry them in her heart, and it's cute to have, like I don't know, I liked it. It's very sweet. I was very surprised by because I didn't know. I really like I said, I don't know anything, but I'd looked at her doll before I'd read the book, and I was like, "She has so many, like, interesting little pieces." She actually also comes with a gourd. which I did think was a little funny. I mean, they have the gourd with them now that they're drinking water
Yeah.
out of, but it's like a coin, a necklace, and a gourd, and her
Everything a
cute
little girl
outfit.
needs.
Everything a little girl needs. So anyway, yeah, I liked it just because I think like little kids, I feel like are very object permanent too. And
Yeah.
so I do think like teaching a little kid that like, hey, you can use this as like a grounding tactic. I
Mhm.
mean, her mom does not use like the therapy type words and things we have now, but
But,
I
like, hold it
liked
and it'll give you bravery or something like that, you
yeah, I
know?
liked it. I thought it was very sweet, and I think it makes her accessory because she's still a conduit for merchandise. Unfortunately, all the dolls are to some level, but I think it makes her doll like that much more special by
I
having it.
agree. So it becomes night again, and they leave the cave, and they have to cross a river. As they go on, like, a harrowing river experience where Mama doesn't know how to swim, and Addie does a little bit because Sam taught her, and so they're trying to cross the river, and this is kind of a very hectic part of it where Mama gets swept away, and I was like, "Oh my god, she's dead." But so Addie is like, "I have to be brave, I have to find mom," so Addie's swimming along the river trying to find her, and she kind of finds Mama stuck on, like, a tree branch. Basically, like, Mama's kind of wrapped on, like, a tree branch a little bit. Um, and so she pulls Mama out, and I did say, like, realistically, unless the river has to be below Mama's head height for them to survive this. Like, even with the
Yeah,
rapids, because Addie can't pull her mom, like, as a swimmer. She is 9 years old, and I'm sure she's not a strong
no.
swimmer, and if her mom doesn't know how to swim at all, like so they her mom must have just lost her footing is what I'm assuming.
Okay, well, because I was gonna say, when you look at the art,
I know, she's, like, drowning.
I think the art is trying to clue you in that what you just said is happening is
Yeah,
what's happening in the scene, because to me, the art looks like Addie is probably standing on tiptoes, like, on an embankment,
yeah,
because she is really from, like, her mid-chest not mid I don't wanna be that dramatic, like, collarbone, a little
yeah.
below her collarbone up, above the water.
Mhm.
That's not something you can achieve by even being a good swimmer.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you're just treading water, but if you're swimming, that part of your body would all be below water,
Mhm.
especially if it's deep. Like, you're not even a strong swimmer would struggle to be in, I think, consistently in the pose she looks like she's standing. So I think
Yeah.
her mother has slipped off into it's kinda like when we go float the river and there are
Yeah.
technically, like, rapids, but if you fall out in those rapids, you're only falling out into, like, 4 feet of water. You're not gonna be into, like, trouble. But
Oh,
then it will drop off suddenly,
what's it
like,
doing? They like I think there's
100
drop
feet
off, so
up.
she may have dropped off, like, into, like, from, like, 5 to, 4 to 5 feet or
Yeah.
something and lost it, but like I said, I was just like, "This
This
has
is
to
why
be."
our listeners tune in.
Yeah,
Deep speculation over the logistics of a swimming sequence in a
of
river.
the so they do successfully get to the other bank, and Mama is very grateful and tells Addie she saved her life, and Addie's so brave. And then there is just, like, a weird at least my other nitpick was it, like, mentions that Addie, like, picks a leech off of her and has a picture of the leech, but then that's
Yeah,
just it.
yeah, it did bother me, mostly because it was like it describes her feeling the necklace, like, against her chest, and she's like, "Okay, the necklace is still there," and she's like, "And something else was sticky and, like, biting at her," and I was like, "Gross. Don't
Leeches are
taint this, like
disgusting.
don't taint that." Yeah. I don't have a lot of here's the thing, leeches are gross. My most visceral fear about swimming I've always been a strong swimmer. I'm not afraid of the ocean. Honestly, it's so funny. Nothing but the ocean really psychs me out that bad, but lakes do. There is so many things that can go wrong in a lake. Also, they have way more of the, like, brain-eating type bacteria and stuff in
Yeah,
them.
because it's
I'm
still
like,
water.
I'm just not that afraid of the ocean. I'm very afraid of lakes. Lakes have and rivers have so many gross, disgusting things in them. When people
Mhm.
are like, "Let's go to the lake," I'm like, "No." I like Barton Springs because I know it's like a spring, and I
Yeah.
know and I can see mostly when it's clear, like, the bottom. I understand what I'm signing up for,
Yeah.
okay? And I know those salamanders are endangered, so I'm not scared of them. Also, they're not going to bother me. But yeah, like leeches, some types of fish. I like snakes, but not in nature. That's not my business.
I
Please
don't
stay
like
away
water
from
snakes.
me.
It seems unnatural,
That's
ironically.
why are you in there? How are you going to get out, freak? You're
It seems
smooth and the
biblically
water's smooth.
wrong.
It feels evil. Yeah. So anyway, that's my Celia River soapbox.
That's okay.
It's
Addy
gross.
feels similar, and they decide to leave the river now, but they do find the train tracks, so they're like, I think we've done enough for today. So they build like a little lean-to and hide out by the train tracks and take a little nap, a
That's
little
right.
honk shoe.
Little honk shoe, safety temporarily.
Chapter 5, Freedom Taken.
That's
Dun, dun,
right.
dun.
Kind of a sleigh title.
Yes, I want to say something at the end about this, but train, choo-choo, a modern marvel passes by, and Addie's like, golly gee, a train, never seen that before. She watches it pass, and then she sees it turn in the distance, and she's like, that's weird. Oh, that must be where the tracks separate, so we must be near the safe house. Mom, we gotta go. We gotta run full force. And Mom is like, hey, still so dangerous. And Addie's like, la 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 la, I don't hear you. Like, gonna go to the safe house. And Addie runs smack dab into the middle of a Confederate camp.
Uh, I'm not often surprised by the turns these books take because, to be honest, nothing has been perhaps as jarring as the Dead Man Raccoon Fest. I was really like, no fucking way. When this happened, I was like, in chapter 5,
She's so close.
This level of dramatics right now.
This is
So
I
anyway.
remember this part so much because I remember being like, I'd be so scared. So she runs into camp, and like the guy is sitting there, like looks at her, and they like make eye contact, and it's like, oh shit. But luckily for Addy, 1, they are racist. 2, they think she's a boy, and 3, they think because they're racist, they think she's a slave boy that they have with them. And so then Addy uses what her dad told her and is like, all right, don't flip shit right now. And she completely like stonewalls. And the guy goes to her and is like, oh boy, like, were you afraid of that train noise? And she just like nods. And he's like, oh, you'll get used to it. Like, bring me some water. So she brings him some water. She brings some other guy some water. And then he turns to go back to bed, but Addy realizes she can't just like run away. So she has to go pretend to sleep. So she goes and lies down in the camp of Confederate soldiers for like probably like 10, 15 minutes before she's like sure they're asleep, which is also scary because she can't just leave because they would think she's the boy escaping. And so then finally, when she thinks the coast is clear, she creeps out. Mama comes and runs and grabs her. Mama's probably been like literally like aneurysm, nosebleed, like
Oh, for
throwing,
sure.
screaming,
She's
crying,
freaking out.
throwing up in the woods. And Mama's like, wow, thank fucking God, let's get the fuck out of here.
Also, I didn't make a note of this, but can I point out something very funny to you?
Yeah.
Maybe it was just me who was like, hee hee ha ha. She is wearing little hoop earrings this whole book.
Yeah, she's
Did you clock
fashionable.
that?
Yeah.
She's
Her
also
doll
wearing
has
them.
little earrings.
I feel like I just didn't notice it like until like midway through the book, and then I was like, it was specifically when she gets caught in the camp. You can see like the lights like reflecting off her little hoop. So I did just have to laugh a little bit that I was like, dang girl, those earrings might have given you away if those men were marginally less
More observant.
yeah, and not terrible evil men.
I know.
But
No,
anyway, yeah, I clocked it and then I went back through every like
Picture.
image of her. Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, that's like a cute
Yeah.
detail."
Her doll has earrings.
I'm looking at that right now. That's so funny. I guess
Yeah,
I
her
just don't think I don't think any of the other girls have had.
her and Josefina have earrings.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah, I love it. I remember I was so jealous that
Celia
Josefina and Addie's dolls had earrings because
Well, they're
I had kit and she
cute.
did. Yeah, they're little hoops.
Anyway, I'm jealous. I need a little hoop.
So they like are finally can breathe. They like run away. They find the safe house And Mama rightfully is like, I'm feeling like a little bit off about all this stuff. And Addy is still like, no, 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 we have to go here. Like, where else are we gonna go? What are we gonna do? Like, we have to. We have no other option. Let's just knock. So
Yep.
they knock on the door and a woman answers, Miss Caroline. Um,
Miss Caroline.
Miss
Okay,
Caroline.
queen.
Okay, abolitionist. But she sees Addy and she's like, "Go away. I already told those like soldiers you're with, like, that I have nothing for you, boy." And Addy like is like, "I'm not a boy." And she like rips off her hat. And the woman's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, hey, slaves, come on in." Um, I did think this is interesting that the woman was so mean. Miss Caroline was so mean to this slave boy who's like a slave. And then her mood completely changed, and I guess it is, like, a complicated dynamic, but it just felt like I don't know, I always thought that was weird that she was just so, like, kind of, like, prickly to someone who was enslaved, who was with the Confederacy, like, not by his choice, you
Well,
know?
I was gonna say, I wonder too if the last time that she encountered them, if he was maybe with soldiers and like
Mhm.
if they were potentially suspicious of her at all, or they've been like camping out near her for a while.
That's true.
Like maybe if she had people like in the house at the time too. But it is interesting, right? Because like what if Addie hadn't like taken the disguise off quickly enough? Like, what do you do then? You just have to wait until you can try again out of
Yeah.
disguise, but then you're risking getting caught even longer.
Yeah, so that was just a little note I noticed that I think there's an interesting thing in this era too that, like, people might have been, like, abolitionists too, but that doesn't mean they weren't, like, prejudiced in some ways sometimes, you know?
Oh,
Like
100%. Absolutely.
like, I think even a few abolitionists and a lot of, anti-slavery people today would be seen racist by today's standards, you know? Like, it's just kind of
Oh,
an interesting dynamic to think about when you're reading these things. Um, but she does let them in, and she softens, and she feeds them, and she's talking to them, and she says, she knows Uncle Solomon. They go way back. They were kids on, like, neighboring plantations, and I'm like, "I wanna hear this story."
right? I know. It's so interesting.
So they, like, get to bathe, which I was saying must feel so good after, like, running and sweating through dirt and muck, and honestly, probably, like, not bathing a lot before that too. Um, and they, get to take a nap, and they get to sleep on, real mattresses for the first time in Addie's
Uh-huh.
life, and she's like, "I could get used to this life. This feels so good." And the next morning, they wake up very early, and Miss Caroline lets them choose outfits from her pile of clothing that, like, are, like, left over, so they have new outfits, and much like Kirsten again, she gets her meat outfit here. So she finds the little pink striped dress and a straw hat, and she gets to try it on, and she looks so cute.
I actually wanna point out something very minorly cute since we've made so many, comparisons between the 2 of them.
Mhm.
They both have little dresses and they both have little bonnets, and actually, if you look at their colorways, they're reversed.
Oh, you're right, that is
Kirsten's
fun.
bonnet is reddish pink with little stripes on it, it's like a gingham
Mhm.
pattern, and her dress is blue with, like, a pattern, and Addie's bonnet has a little blue ribbon on it, and her dress is pink and white.
Oh, that is funny. Yeah,
Anyway, I have no
they were
idea if that was on
interesting.
purpose, but it's just very cute. I think it's I don't know, I love a little I think they are all separate, but I think that there are nods to the other girls on occasion
Well, I was
in the
gonna say when you
things.
mentioned the thing about the necklace too, Kirsten's necklace was her grandmother's.
Mhm.
So it's kind of another parallel.
I like it. I would love to maybe dig, like, deeper, and we can come back to it maybe in our yapping episode if we do
Mhm.
find anything about it, but I would be curious if some of these parallels were intentional to some degree because I think, like, the girls are meant to showcase, like, life at different points in American history, right? And I think it is endearing that even though Kirsten and Addie's lives are so different, like, dramatically so, that you can still see that there are lots of little things they have in common. Which is kind of the
Yeah.
whole point, right? Anyway.
Well, it's interesting because this is, Kirsten's 1854 and this is 1864, so Kirsten's just like a 20-year-old in Minnesota right now.
Isn't that crazy?
What's she thinking?
She's like, "Damn, I hope my house doesn't burn down again. I don't know if I'm gonna literally win the lottery with fur ever
War
again."
doesn't make it all the way up here, she says.
Maybe she's married to that trapper boy.
John Stewart.
John Stewart.
Maybe she's in Oregon, you mean? She finally
Mm.
made it.
Could be.
We
Hard
can
to say.
hope. But she gets her meat dress, Mama gets a new outfit, and Miss Caroline tells them the plan, which is that they will she's going to sneak them off to kind of the docks, like the Outer Banks, basically is what I'm gathering, or the seaside, and they're
Mhm.
going to take a boat to Philly, which seems like probably the most direct and easiest route to freedom from here, because they'd have to pass through Virginia if they kept
Yeah.
going by land, which feels risky. That's probably
Mhm.
most of the battles are happening at this point. So they hide in the back of the wagon under some stuff, and Addie clutches her cowrie shell necklace and whispers to Mama that they've taken their freedom back. And the book ends. And the one thing I did want to say was I added the word back in because she said we've taken our freedom. And I feel like this is the English major in me. I feel like freedom taken is the wrong word, because it feels like it's being taken feels like it's a verb that's like something's like it feels like when I read freedom taken, I thought it was like the risk of the Confederacy taking the chance of freedom away from them. It's just I don't know why, but the word phrasing is like cluttered to me, saying taken instead of without saying
Did we
back.
read different reads of this book?
No, I read the same one in our file. Why?
Well, 'cause mine says we took our freedom.
No, I'm talking about the chapter title with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
LOL. I thought you were talking about the thing
No,
at
no,
the end
no.
of the book, and I was like, "Oh my god, did we read different
No, the chapter
things?"
being freedom taken, yeah.
Oh, LOL, sorry. Yes, anyway. I agree.
And
I
yeah,
understand.
we took our freedom is better, but yeah,
I
but
was
it just,
like,
made
"Wait."
me think I wanted to say at the end of the chapter, yeah.
No, okay. That makes much more sense. I was like, "Oh my god." I was like, "How weird would it be if we were reading just
That was
marginally different ver"
just one word.
Anyway, that's just a silly brain fart.
But yeah, so in the next book, she'll be in Philly. Woo-hoo!
Whee!
Philadelphia, flip,
She's
flip,
gotta learn a
Philadelphia,
lesson.
flip, flip, flip.
I feel like she might be our first real learns un
Learner.
yeah, or I'm kind of curious if she'll kind of continue to feel a little like Kirsten.
I think there might be some interesting Kirsten parallels in this a little bit.
Yeah, something
Um,
much to yap about in our yapisode.
yeah. So,
But
Peek into the Past is all about slavery. Yikes. So, I did say I did
yes.
think this section did a much better job than the than the Felicity mentions of
Yes.
slavery, telling how bar none, how bad slavery was. There was no, but sometimes
100%.
things were, fun. Um,
It's a pretty
they
robust peek into the past
it's a
too,
very long peek
compared
into the
to
past,
some of our
yeah.
others.
Mhm. So they talk about slavery, and they do, mention things that I think are important to know about it, where it says, slaveholders would, basically just, they'd say, "Hey, look, treatment varied, but by and large,
Mostly
they
not.
provided the bare minimum." You had the bare minimum clothing, you had the bare minimum food, you had the bare minimum shelter. Sure, some people are treated slightly better, but they're slaves. How
Right.
good is it, you know? Um, and they talk about, they do touch on the unique family structure, and they do point out that a lot of slaves had kind of, fictive kin because of the fact that families were split up, that you kind of built family around you with other people on the plantation, kinda like Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon. They're not actually they're not actually Addie's grandparents, but they kind of
Right.
serve as grandparent figures, and you kind of had a larger, I guess, family unit, in the sense that, you had a community that worked as a family, because
Mhm.
there's so many people being split up that it was just, strength in numbers.
Yeah, the
Um,
function of it.
yeah, they talk really briefly, not as much, about house slaves versus field slaves, and how house slaves had slightly better, like, standard of living, clothes, feeding. But I mean, I
But
like
even
that
that, like,
also.
nominal, right?
Well, and also, that was also, not even, a, nice thing necessarily. It was more of just, a presentation thing, where it's you want your house slaves to look good, you want it they're in the house, they should be they have to be
Right.
presentable. It's more of a selfish thing, I think, from the master's point of view, rather than I think any situation with it isn't "Oh, well, they treat these guys slightly better because they like them better." It's they got like we said earlier, the sometimes lighter skinned, more attractive, more, like
Well, even having
presentable.
even I was gonna say, even having Addy in the house when she's, like, serving, and it's like, "Oh, well, she's, like, a cute little girl."
Mhm.
Like, and so much so the freak who's in the house is like, "Well, what about her?" And he's like, "No, this is a good one. Enough."
Yeah. So they talked about that a little bit. And then it did have an interesting thing about kind of West Africa and the influence of West Africa over slavery. And they point out that a lot of words that we still use today come from West African languages like yam and banjo and canoe. And I didn't know canoe was. I kind of assumed that was Native American, like kayak, but that's pretty cool. And they also go into a little bit about spirituals, how they came from African Americans, going to church,
Mhm.
or, yeah, going to church. They were allowed to go to church, they're allowed to worship, and so they would be listening to, like, Christian songs, but they would kind of put kind of traditional West African music spins on it, so they became the spirituals that, like, we were talking about earlier, kind of, and that eventually led to things like jazz and pretty much every other type of music that's ever been made in America. So, I think I was impressed with this peek into the past. They go into a little bit about the Civil War, which
Yeah.
I won't go into that much detail about because 'cause I'm sure you guys all know about the Civil War. Ever heard of it? The war between the states?
Ever
Um,
heard of it?
but they do again, I think they do point out that, like, it wasn't like, they point out that slavery was an issue in the Civil War, and it was a lot of the, like, tension rising was because of things like Celia said, like, new states coming into the Union, would they be slave? Would they be free? And, like, the anger and the tension that was building because of that, and then the North abolishing slavery around the early 1800s, the slave trade ending in 1808, and kind of the South clinging on to it as it was getting less and less popular of, like, a way of life. They point out that that's the reason that started, but they do, I think, do a decent job saying that that's not the only reason that
Correct.
they had
Right.
it, and they do say the kinda thing that we mentioned earlier about the Emancipation Proclamation being something that came later into the war, and that it was something that kind of convinced a lot of slaves, like Addie's family, to kind of try their luck and, like, leave. And that's where it ends.
We
So, guys, we did it. That was Meet Addie. My final thoughts were this is the most my final thoughts were this is the most action-packed meet we've had yet. This is like you've heard us talk about before how we think that like sometimes the first 2 chapters are unnecessary. This wasn't. This was
n
like pretty much just like everything.
not a complaint in sight from me here.
Yeah. I thought they did a very good job of showing how cruel slavery was just on a daily basis, and I did think it was kind of interesting, though, that their escape from slavery was relatively drama-free. I thought it was interesting that Connie chose to put the drama on the plantation as opposed to the escape, you know?
Yeah, I think it was I she's a great writer, and I think she did a good job with the pacing and the dramatics for a 5-chaptered book
Mhm.
in which she had to get a little girl from slavery to freedom.
Yeah. No, I think I thought it was really good, and, knowing that she had a lot more creative freedom over these books, I'm interested to see kind of how they might slightly differ from the usual structure we're seeing, if
Mhm.
at all, and, I kinda said, "I like Addie so far," and I do think this is a bit on purpose as we discussed, but she does have kind of a little bit of a Kirsten syndrome where we don't know that much about her personality yet, where it's just kind of because there was so much going on to get out that there wasn't that much internal monologue or, like,
Right.
interactions even that you saw how she would interact with other people, and now that we're out of the South, I'm excited to see what her journey is like as a free little black girl in Philadelphia during the war, so
I know. I said similarly, I said, I think, starting with them escaping, like, from slavery was the right decision because I think as a child, you get to understand where she came from, and now we'll get to walk into her new chapter of life with her,
Mhm,
much like Kirsten. I'm excited because I kind of I'm hopeful that what's gonna happen is we had this book, which is almost acting as, like, a prequel book, like an actual, like, "Hey, this is setting up her life, and then the other 5 books will be her life, and I'm wondering if she'll kind of feel more like a Felicity, where with Felicity from book 1, even though, we had our complaints here and there about the beginning of some of her books dragging on, and, love her, she's my gal, my gal Friday, my gal Sunday, whatever the saying is. But I think Addie, because she will get to just go be in the world, I'm wondering if we will get more of a Felicity-esque look at her life now, because she'll get to be a little girl now,
Yeah.
right? Like, there will still be different constraints and weights on her because of her history, but and the time period that she's in, but I think she'll get to go to school, it appears. She'll
Mhm.
get to maybe get another doll,
Mhm.
maybe get to see her family again or not. I mean, it feels like it set up a lot of thread points here. So,
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think she will be narratively perhaps one of the most compelling
Yeah, I
characters,
think so too.
girls we had so far.
No, I'm excited for it. And yeah, and I enjoyed reading it. And I'm excited to see what comes next for our little gal Addy.
Intrepid little gal.
Yeah, I'm excited to see her personality shine a little bit more. Hoping that everything goes well from here on out. Hoping that we can be a little bit like sillier in the future too. I think we'll be able to get a little bit back more to our like goofiness in the next ones. But as you guys can probably guess, this book didn't offer as much hee hee ha ha moments for us. But if you liked it anyway, you can let's see. This is gonna be a hard one.
I was literally like, Send this to somebody you want to learn more about American history.
Send this to somebody who grew up on the Underground Railroad path.
Send this to somebody who loves historical fiction.
Send this to somebody who would make a necklace out of a shell.
Send this to somebody you would save from drowning in a river.
And share this with your friend who does magic tricks like coins pulling out of your ear.
Like and subscribe. Send us a comment. Send us a DM. We're not we're not so big yet that we're not afraid to respond.
We like
We love
responding
it.
to you guys. And especially with the Addy books, like, don't attack us with things. But, like, if we get things wrong, like, please comment, let us know. I'm trying to do more research on these books ahead of them than maybe, like, Samantha. But, like, we might get things wrong. We might be inaccurate. Like, we are but two white women, covering a, delicate period of American history. But, we're having fun doing it, and I'm having fun learning, and, 'cause I think I only ever read Meet Addy, so I'm excited to kind of read the rest of them and kind of explore, and I think it's gonna be an interesting kind of look into a specific time period, so
She's curious to me too because I know from the doll snooping I've done on Reddit, on Instagram, whatever, she actually seems to be a relatively well-loved doll. Like
well, she's,
now.
like, almost winning that elimination game that's going on Reddit. Have you seen that?
No.
They're doing like one of those, like, picture lists, where you, like, vote to eliminate. I think it's
Yeah.
down to last I checked, it was down to Kaya, Samantha, and Addy.
That's so funny. But yeah, I
So,
feel like she's got some diehard fans.
yeah.
So
And
I'll
we're
be
fans
interested.
already, so
That's true.
we'll get you guys next week with Addy Learns a Lesson, and until then, stay beautiful, stay safe,
Stay beautiful.
and
Love
stay
ya.
American Girl. Bye.
Bye.
Follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a waiting for to carry you to freedom if you follow